But either way, the last couple of centuries have provided some really interesting times and certainly no signs of slowing down in the future.
Well, we won't go back to when Ben Franklin invented fire insurance and said, you had to buy my fire insurance, so my volunteer fire department wouldn't respond to your fire. We'll stop somewhere earlier than that.
All right, today we have with us Robin Harbage, retired insurance executive turned investor and advisor. Welcome, Robin.
Hey, thank you very much, Amber.
Yeah, great to have you. I think I'm always so fascinated by both the history of insurance and where we're currently at, and you've got both. So really excited to jump into the conversation today.
That sounds good.
And one of the most challenging paths of innovation is doing something new, something that no one has ever done before, where there's no blueprint and no footsteps to follow. In 1997, when the internet was in its infancy for commercial uses, you were launching one of the first public-facing online insurance sales systems. So what did you learn from that experience, and what advice would you give to innovators moving through uncharted territory today?
So I found oftentimes in insurance companies get stuck in this mentality of it's never been done before. We've always done it this way. Let's stick with what we know works. So when you start something completely new, like sales on the internet, which Progressive launched in 1997, you have to ask yourself, where do you go for expertise? Where do you go for ideas such as that? And we actually knew that there wasn't going to be anybody that had broken the road, put anything out there about how to sell on the internet. So what we decided to do was look around for other industries that were good at it. And we found Dell Computers was probably one of the best of breed at that point in time in selling over the internet. And they had similar problems. So when we went to sell over the internet, we found people were uncomfortable without some kind of expert, if you will, somebody like an agent or a sales rep talking to them and recommending coverages and things like that. When we looked at Dell Computers, we found that they had put together something we called packages, where they would show a mid-price computer set along with componentry like printers and monitors, etc. And then they have a little bit more expensive version, then they have a little more less expensive version. And we said, well, this is very similar, putting together packages of coverages. So we actually took that concept, put it out there with what we call the mid-priced item that was something people like you might buy. So we weren't acting as an agent saying we recommend this. All we said was, based on all the underwriting information that we have about you, we know that you're in this demographic and people like you often buy these things. But then here's a little more expensive package of coverages, and here's a little less expensive package of coverages. It worked extremely well. We were shocked at how much our ability to get people to click what we call the buy button, which essentially bound the policy for themselves online without ever talking to an individual, just jumped. And all we showed was we had to go outside of the norm, outside the industry, and in order to be creative. And that's something I think people oftentimes don't think of, is how you can go outside of the box that we all find ourselves as insurers to do something creative.
I think that's a great point, is transferring that trusted advisor from in person and finding a way to do that digitally. And I think it's so fascinating how that consumer experience translated over to insurance, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's so many comparisons, especially thinking about something like computers at the time, where it was still, from a consumer perspective, a relatively new, often intimidating kind of buying experience.
Exactly. And components that may or may not be compatible to the computer power that you wanted was something that people just didn't always have the expertise. And the same thing was exactly true of insurance, where somebody said, well, if I buy this limit on this car, what kind of deductible do I need? How many physical damage coverages? And all these things were terms and thoughts they didn't have. As completely different as possible to computers, but the concept of expertise was as similar as you can imagine.
I think that's really an incredible, pivotal time in history. I recall that when the internet really shifted from a passive experience, just absorbing information like a static business card, to an actual user experience. And you were on the front lines with that. That's really, I think, a fascinating point in history for all industries, but certainly insurance as well. And which of the emerging technologies do you see playing a key role in insurance's future in the next 5 to 10 years?
There's some emerging technologies that people are starting to use with greater ability to do some very interesting things. And I would list artificial intelligence and virtual reality right up there as emerging technologies that have great potential for us, not just in insurance, but in industries of all kinds.
Yeah, using AI and even virtual reality for adjusting, for example, there's so many opportunities. I think we're a lot closer than you would initially think when you're envisioning a futuristic scenario like this.
Right. And understand that insurers have for more than a decade now, way more than a decade, have used pictures taken by a mobile phone to adjust claims with, where the person simply takes pictures of the scene of the car and just uploads those, and the adjuster immediately begins ever going to the site, adjusting the claim. This is just saying you don't have to have this as manual as necessary, because with tens of thousands of claims and all the information surrounding that accident, you can immediately begin to compute, some of this information before the person even has to speak with the person or get online.
Right, and one thing we always like to ask is, what is one thing you've learned in the past month?
So one thing that has struck me in the past month is the absolute need for diversity. So I don't care whether it is diversity of gender, of age, of ethnicity, or just of experiences in business or in life. I think that every company needs to be looking long and hard at their diversity of their workforce right now, because that's where I think you get new ideas, you get innovation, you get strength of any organization. And all the companies to whom I advise or serve on the board, I am pushing them really hard right now to just reach out and think about their programs for recruiting at the board level, at the entry employee level, at senior employee level, and think about trying to find as much diversity as you can, because I think that's the strength that really differentiates many companies. So I'm pushing that as my mantra for the moment.
I could not agree more. I think it's really easy to develop an echo chamber of similar thoughts. And certainly there's something to be said for a cultural fit of, does someone work in this company? But you also need to have a diverse set of team members, or you won't reach your potential as you innovate, as you grow as an organization.
Absolutely. And even though it's great to work with people with whom you have a lot in common, sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to create change. And having a somewhat uncomfortable interactions with people because they're very different from you can actually be a great instigator for change in an organization.
I feel like the universe is trying to tell me that. I've heard this in a few different ways over the last few weeks, is like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and uncomfortable is where the growth starts. And it makes perfect sense. I think probably because we're all having sort of an uncomfortable year. It's been sort of a strange year. But I think it definitely creates growth. And if you're comfortable, maybe ask yourself what you can do to get out of that sense of comfort and stretch a little bit more.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. Really enjoyed your perspective.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this very much, Amber. Appreciate the time.
Thanks.